I arrived just after the original girl died. She was the daughter of a powerful man, but her mother was dead, and she was raised in seclusion, tormented despite her high status. A cruel stepmother and a cold father. Her childhood sweetheart, the one she saw as her only hope, deliberately set a trap and let bandits get their hands on her. Utterly broken, she smashed her head against a wall and ended her life. Poor girl. She was so fragile, so unable to protect herself. Just a lamb to the slaughter. But I'm different. I kill without blinking. I'm ruthless. I'll get her revenge for her. When I took over, the original girl's body was already dead. She'd rammed her head into a wall. There was a hole in her skull, and blood was leaching out like a geyser. The pain was almost enough to kill me all over again. I looked down. I was naked, my body covered in bruises. Then I looked up at the filthy man standing before me. I didn't need to inherit her memories to finally out what had just happened. The scumbag was still grinning lewdly. Damn, you high society ladies are something else. Skin so soft, and even your screams are delicate. Haha, you're with me now. It's not a bad deal for you. You'll be my bandit queen. I gave him a confused look. Dude, seriously? Do you not see the gaping hole in my head? Were you hiding somewhere when I did that? As I was thinking this, my eyes landed on something in the cave. A sharp, jutting rock. I got it. After he was done with her, the original girl had been completely shattered. While he wasn't looking, she'd thrown herself head first onto that rock and died without a sound. I sighed. Sweetheart, you should have at least tried to survive. Was it worth it to just give up like that? You should have taken a few of them with you. I clutched the hole in my head, about to look for something to use as a bandage, when I felt the wound rapidly healing under my hand. Me? Well damn. Am I Spider-Man now? Is this some kind of perk for transmigrators? Whatever it was, the hole in my head closed up, and the feeling of imminent death finally faded. I let out a huge sigh of relief. Then, as the man stared in astonishment, I put on a seductive act, throwing myself at him and wrapping my arms around his neck. My husband, you've had your way with me. From now on, I am yours. He grabbed my waist, his hands greedily stroking my smooth skin. Glad you know your place. A high society girl like you really knows how to please a man. I kept my seductive smile plastered on my face, my finger tracing circles on his chest. My husband, are you hungry? Why don't I go make you something to eat? Once you've had your fill, we can continue. His expression was a mixture of confusion, surprise, and suspicion. You're really okay with this? Oh, stop. I pretended to be shy, turning my face away. You were so strong, my husband. I was quite pleased. The man was shocked, but he quickly got over it, letting out a booming laugh and throwing his coat over my shoulders. All right, go on and cook. Let me see what you can do. On the way to the kitchen, I sifted through the original girl's memories, managing to piece together a few fragments of information. This was a bandit hideout. The original girl, Eleanor, was the Prime Minister's legitimate daughter, a true socialite. She'd been abducted by these bandits and lost her virtue. Her name was Eleanor, same as mine. The bandits had appeared out of nowhere, while she was on her way to a temple. It was suspicious, as if they knew her exact route, and were waiting for her to walk right into their trap. There was probably someone else pulling the strings. Maybe because she had just died, I couldn't get much more information. But this was enough. I ignored the leering, speculative glances from the men around me, and walked calmly into the kitchen. The bandits all knew their boss had already had me. Seeing the messy state of my clothes, they finally hammered he'd already stripped me down and checked me from head to toe. So I couldn't possibly be a threat. They felt safe letting me cook for them. They even told me to make enough for everyone. If we can't have a taste of the high society girl, we might as well have a taste of her cooking. The men snickered. I feigned a timid posture and meekly agreed. Once I was in the kitchen, smoke soon began to rise from the chimney, and the aroma of food filled the entire hideout. I made them a big plate of spicy chicken stew. The world I'd landed in seemed to be a fantasy setting. I couldn't tell the dynasty from their clothes, but common ingredients and spices weren't lacking. Even in a bandit hideout, I could make a decent stew. They even had chili peppers, believe it or not. In this Liamly medieval world? Okay then. The The details weren't important. What mattered was, I made the stew. Then I noticed another discrepancy. For a world with such a rich variety of ingredients and spices, the level of cooking was surprisingly low. From the bandits' amazed expressions when they saw the stew, and the way they devoured it like pigs, I could tell these Liams didn't usually eat well. How strange. Who created this world full of plot holes? And for what purpose? I was very curious. After they finished eating, I brought out the wine from the kitchen, poured a full bowl, walked over, and plopped myself into the bandit chief's lap. My husband, a toast to you. The chief, his face greasy from the meal, snatched the bowl from my hand and downed it in one liamulp. Then he slung me over his shoulder and headed for his bedroom. Before, he'd defiled me in a filthy cave. That was deliberate. Now that I was submissive, he was taking me to his clean bedroom. This was his version of a reward. I tugged at his collar and purred, "Hurry, my husband. I can't wait." He slapped my butt hard and quickened his pace. The men in the main hall heard my eager cries and roared with laughter. Look at the Prime Minister's daughter. One roll in the hay, and she's wilder than a girl from a brothel. The chief carried me back to his room and tossed me onto the bed. Then he started frantically tearing off his clothes. I just watched him with a little smile. The next second, he clutched his stomach and vomited all over the floor. A wave of intense dizziness made him lose his balance, and he collapsed into his own puke. I sat on the bed, calmly counting on my fingers and waiting. The man on the floor struggled, moaning weakly, trying to grab me. I looked away. He couldn't reach me anyway. Soon, there was no more movement from the bedside. The chief was in shock. I swung my legs off the bed, bent down, and pulled a dagger from his belt. It was more of a short sword, really crude, but as long as my forearm. A deadly weapon. I tested the edge with my fingertip. Sharp enough. I raised it high and plunged it straight into the bandit chief's chest. In his state of shock, he didn't even let out a whimper before he died. I pulled the dagger out. Blood splattered all over my face and sprayed onto the wall behind him. A crimson mural, grotesquely beautiful. The roles of hunter and prey can switch in an instant. I flicked the blood from the dagger, wiped my face, and pushed the door open. Outside, men were lying scattered all over the floor. Seeing me, a blood-soaked Philiamra holding a knife, approaching them, some of them groaned in pain and tried to crawl away. Others just cursed at me. I was unmoved. One by one, I mechanically reaped their lives. Only a few were still conscious enough to make a sound. Most were already unconscious. Vomit and excrement were everywhere. The killing was easy. I walked into the main hall and glanced at the table. The stew was almost gone, with only a potato or two left in the dish. They must have been too full to finish. I picked up a cold piece of potato and stared at it. Solanine. A toxin concentrated in sprouted potatoes. Highly poisonous. A dose of 0.2 to 0.4 grams can be fatal. The familiar data flowed through my mind. I casually tossed the potato aside with a smirk. These idiots had a whole sack of sprouted potatoes piled up in their warm, damp kitchen. Killing them was too easy. The amount of solanine in those sprouts might not have been enough to kill all of them, but it was more than enough to make them nauseous, dizzy, and vomit until they went into shock, rendering them completely helpless. The potatoes did the heavy lifting. I just cleaned up. A perfect plan. I did a final sweep of the hideout to make sure no one was left alive. Then I went back to the woodshed, gathered some firewood, and heated up some water. It took a while, but I had a hot bath, washing away the filth and changing into clean clothes I found among the bandits' loot. I have to say, taking a bath alone in this silent, corpse-strewn hideout was a novel experience. There was a strange sense of security. Clean and dressed, I stepped over the bodies and searched room by room until I finally found the chief's study. I pulled open the drawers, took out all the letters and documents, and went through them one by one. I discovered something very interesting. There were numerous letters between the bandits and a man named Liam. It seemed Liam was the real master of this hideout. All the bandits' actions were under his command. Liam. According to the original Eleanor's memories, that was the name of her childhood sweetheart. The boy she'd grown up with, who'd promised to marry her, was secretly running a gang of bandits. He had even arranged for them to abduct and assault her. What an interesting Liami. Poor Eleanor must have had the worst luck in 8 lifetimes to have a childhood friend like that. But wait, something's not right. According to Eleanor's memories, Liam was just the son of a 5th-rank official. How could the son of a minor official afford to maintain such a large bandit operation? There had to be someone else behind him. For now, I didn't know who. I searched the entire study, even tapping the walls for hidden compartments. Once I was sure I hadn't missed anything, I gathered all the evidence of Liam's collusion with the bandits and took it with me. With this, if used correctly, I could ruin Liam's reputation and send him to his grave. I walked slowly out of the hideout. In the bright moonlight, I took one last look at the dark, looming den. Then I turned away, a small smile on my face, leaving all that filth and grime behind me. Next up, revenge. The Prime Minister's residence was in chaos. The news that the Prime Minister's eldest daughter had been abducted by bandits on her way to a temple had spread through the capital like wildfire. The person behind it all clearly wanted everyone to know as quickly as possible. But they never would have imagined I'd escape the bandit hideout so soon. So when I, surrounded by a retinue of maids and servants, appeared in the main hall, everyone froze. Eleanor? What are you doing here? My stepmother's eyes went wide, and the handkerchief she was using to hide her smile dropped to the floor. My father and my siblings were also staring at me, dumbfounded. I put on a perfectly bewildered expression. What is everyone doing here? Why did I just hear someone say I was abducted by bandits? Everyone exchanged glances, their eyes finally settling on my stepmother. She was the one who had brought the news back. My stepmother flinched, then let out a loud, fake wail and rushed towards me. Eleanor, my dear, how did you escape? Didn't those bandits say they were going to make you their queen? They were tearing at your clothes, you. She looked me up and down, but finding no trace of violation on my face, she froze mid-sentence. I grabbed her wrist and gently pushed her away, not letting her block me. Mother, what are you talking about? Are you delirious? I went to the temple, had a meal, and came back. How could you spread such a rumor that I was defiled by bandits? My stepmother stared at me, blankly, but still tried to nail me to the cross of shame. Eleanor, what are you saying? I saw you with my own eyes being taken by bandits. Watch yourself, mother. I suddenly shouted, glaring at her. I left this house perfectly safe and returned perfectly safe. Nothing happened. Why must you insist on humiliating me like this? Even if you've been possessed by some demon, you shouldn't speak such wild words and tarnish the family's name. At this point, everyone understood what was going on. The stepmother's desperate attempt to destroy me had completely exposed her own malicious heart. My father shot her a venomous look. Someone take her away. Make her kneel in the ancestral hall for 2 days, until she learns what she can and cannot say. If the lady of the house doesn't know how to protect this family's reputation, then she doesn't deserve to be the lady of the house. His words were incredibly harsh. My stepmother was so frightened she swallowed all the accusations she had been about to spew. She knew my father's temper. At this point, she had no proof I'd been assaulted, and since I'd returned so quickly, she couldn't force the accusation to stick. Without any evidence, if she kept insisting I'd lost my virtue, my father would be the first to shut her down. So, she could only let the servants lead her away, resentfully, to go kneel in the ancestral hall. After she was gone, the hall fell silent. The whole bizarre drama had started and ended just as strangely. Many people still hadn't finally hammered out what just happened. I curtsied to my father, my face etched with worry. Father, on my way back, I heard rumors spreading outside that I'd been taken by bandits. How could such a baseless rumor spread so quickly? It was all over town before anyone in our own household even knew. Who could be behind this, trying to stain your good name? Father, you must investigate this thoroughly. My father's expression was grim. He studied me for a moment, then said, "You come with me." With that, he turned and walked towards his study. I offered a small smile to my siblings in the hall and then followed him, my posture poised and dignified. Round 1 of my comeback was a success. In the study, my father sat behind his desk, his gaze icy as he watched me. I met his stare without flinching. I knew that my little performance might have fooled the others, but it wouldn't fool this old political fox. He knew my stepmother had likely orchestrated the whole thing, But somehow, I'd escaped the bandit's clutches and turned the tables on her. He needed to know what really happened. You truly did not lose your virtue? My father asked in a low voice. I shook my head. No. Then how did you escape? Father, surely you don't think my maternal grandfather's family has had no contact with me all these years since my mother's death? I gave a slight smile. Mrs. Chen wanted to ruin my reputation and my life. It was thanks to the men my grandfather sent to protect me in secret that I was saved. Otherwise, I don't know if I would have ever made it back to see you again. Hearing this, my father immediately recalled the power of my mother's family, and a look of understanding crossed his face. So it was your grandfather's family. Did they clean up properly? I smiled a little arrogantly. Of course. You can rest assured, father. All the bandits are gone. Not a single one left. As I said this, I made a throat-slitting gesture. Only then did my father let out a long sigh of relief. I continued, I can guarantee that no news will leak from the bandit side. However, it's clear Mrs. Chen was willing to risk the family's reputation, just to get rid of me. That, I'm afraid, is beyond my control. Ignoring the sudden darkening of my father's face, I smiled and bowed. I've done the best I can. As for how to handle that viper and how to clear up these rumors to save our family's reputation, that's up to you, father. My little dose of poison worked perfectly. That night, a servant came to report that my father had gone to the ancestral hall and torn into my stepmother, Mrs. Chen. He even slapped her twice, so hard that her hair was a mess and her cheeks were red and swollen. She looked nothing like the lady of the house. My father threatened to divorce her and got her to confess how she'd spread the rumors. He then sent men out that same night to deal with the gossipmongers. He also stationed people in crowded areas, with orders to beat up anyone spreading rumors about me and then hand them over to the authorities. At the same time, he ordered me to attend more high society gatherings and show my face, so more people would know that nothing had ever happened to me. Of course, I was happy to cooperate. After all this, the rumors about me in the capital quickly died down, and the family's reputation was saved. My stepmother, Mrs. Chun, however, bore the full force of my father's wrath. After kneeling in the ancestral hall for a few days, she came out to find my father ignoring her completely. It's been almost a month, and he hasn't set foot in her room, spending every night with concubine May instead. It was a public and brutal humiliation. It was also a warning to anyone else in the household who might think of tarnishing the family's name. Cross that line, and you'll end up worse than the stepmother. After this incident, my status in the family soared. My father, believing my lie that I still had influence over my maternal grandfather's family, became much more protective of me. The servants, who always know which way the wind is blowing, saw the shift in their master's attitude and became much more attentive to me as well. And with my father's encouragement, I was constantly out and about, attending one socialite's garden party or another's poetry reading. It only made it seem like my father valued me even more, elevating my status to something truly precious. In a short time, I went from being the invisible eldest daughter to a radiant Philiamra at the center of attention, living a life of luxury and splendor. This was a life the original Eleanor hadn't experienced since her own mother died. And now, I held it easily in my hands. For me, this power struggle was effortless. For her, it was a destination she had walked towards for 10 years and never reached. In the end, Eleanor was just a 16-year-old girl raised in seclusion. She wasn't some prodigy. With a neglectful father and a tormenting stepmother, she couldn't have taught herself about perspective, about fighting, about strategy, all while confined to her room. She was trapped in a tiny box, where even her smile had to be perfectly measured. You can't expect a child who's been conditioned and emotionally abused her whole life to suddenly break free and take control of her destiny. Especially when she was surrounded by wolves and tigers, giants she couldn't possibly fight. The rules of etiquette and filial piety pinned her down completely. Her tragedy was set in stone. I came too late to save her. All I can do for her now is get revenge. I only have 3 goals in this family. Gain power, and for God's sake, gain more power. So I stuck close to my father, because he was the center of power in this household. My father wanted me to attend more high society gatherings to stabilize the family's reputation. I used this as an opportunity to ask him to foot the bill for the most expensive silks for my dresses and the most fashionable jewelry to make an impression. The first time I asked him, he automatically said, "Such trivial matters are for your mother to handle. Go find her." When he finished, he waited for me to leave, but I just stood there, smiling silently at him. I didn't say a word, but I didn't move. My unusual behavior finally made him remember what my stepmother had just tried to do. My father had a very convenient memory when it didn't concern his own interests. That's why he could thoughtlessly tell me to go ask that viper for help. Ahem, he cleared his throat, trying to hide his awkwardness. "How much money do you need? Take my token and get it from the bookkeeper yourself." I looked at the token he tossed on the table, but didn't immediately take it. Instead, I asked in a clear voice, "The gatherings I'll be attending are with the top socialites in the capital. Father, do you know what that entails?" "What do you mean?" he asked, confused. "In the capital's high society, a single headpiece can cost a fortune," I said slowly. "As for dresses, let's not even talk about how the fabric must be the finest, or how one outfit can cost hundreds of dollars. The most important thing is a socialite's dress is only worn once." Ignoring my father's souring expression, I continued calmly, "You must have a different dress for every event. Besides the one you're wearing, you need at least 2 more of the same quality, just in case one gets soiled and you have nothing to change into. That would be a laughingstock." I looked my father straight in the eye and curtsied with a smile. I've never attended these gatherings before, because my monthly allowance is only $2. I couldn't even dream of buying proper dresses or jewelry, let alone treating anyone to a meal. And Mrs. Chen never provided me with any high-end clothes or accessories, so you were never aware of these trivialities. But now that I have to move in these circles for the sake of our family's honor, this is money that must be spent, no matter how much it hurts. So I'd like to ask you, Father, this token you've given me, exactly how much money can I withdraw from the accounts with it?" My father, who had originally planned to give me $100 to get rid of me. After learning I'd gotten a token from my father that allowed me to withdraw unlimited funds from the family accounts, Mrs. Chun, as expected, couldn't sit still. She stormed into my father's study to AR Liam with him. But the more they talked, the angrier they got, and it ended in a huge fight. Mrs. Chun had no ground to stand on. The more she complained, the more it reminded my father that the only reason I needed to attend all these parties was to clean up the family's reputation, a reputation she had tried to ruin in the first place. In other words, the reason he was spending so much money was all because of her. And not only was she not remorseful, but she also had the nerve to AR Liam with him about it. My father got even angrier. So Mrs. Chun earned herself 2 more slaps and a 3-day kneeling session in the ancestral hall. When the servants brought me the news, I was laughing so hard I was rolling on the bed. My personal maid, Joy, was puzzled. "My lady, why would she risk making him angry like that? Has she already forgotten what she did just a short while ago?" I slowly stirred the sweet soup in my small bowl with a long, thin golden spoon and explained nonchalantly, "Joy, when people are used to winning for too long, their way of thinking becomes fixed. It's hard for them to change course all at once. Mrs. Chun has been in control of this household for 10 years, stomping all over the original Eleanor for just as long. She's grown accustomed to her high and mighty position. So, how could she truly be willing to lie low? Even if her rational mind told her this wasn't the right time to clash with her husband, her emotions got the better of her. She would rather fight with him than see me succeed in living the life of a proper socialite. Humans are always driven by emotion. No matter how rational someone claims to be, at their core, emotions are in the driver's seat. I learned that from countless criminal cases before I transmigrated. Even the most vicious, cold-blooded killer might surrender without a fight because he's afraid of scaring his mother. Even with a Liam in the drawer right next to him. Logic tells him to kill the cops and run, that it's his only chance. But emotion drives him to give up that chance. Humans are always driven by emotion. Even a sociopath has a circle of people they care about, however small. So it was completely predictable that Mrs. Chun would make such a foolish move. For an arrogant person, there is nothing more unbearable than seeing an ant they once crushed suddenly become someone they have to treat with respect. Just the thought of me being on her level was enough to make her skin crawl. So of course she was going to go complain to my father. I sighed softly and finished the last sip of my sweet soup. The art of manipulation is just about understanding interests and human nature. That's all. It's like I was born for this. So I was destined to thrive in this family. After my stepmother, Mrs. Chun, failed repeatedly in her attempts to frame me, her standing in the family began to decline. Of course, this decline was only relative. She was still the mistress of the house, the one whose word was law in the domestic sphere. She just couldn't control me anymore. Because I had used the bandit incident to break free from her grasp. My allowance wasn't her concern. My clothes and jewelry weren't her concern. My entire life was reported directly to my father and managed by me. I had become a master with a voice of my own. So as I rose, she felt her own status fall. As expected, after a series of major setbacks, Mrs. Chun got desperate. And that's when Liam appeared as if on cue. When that handsome, elegant young man with the clear, bright eyes stood before me. A wave of sadness washed over me. I clutched my heart and silently told myself, "Don't be sad. He's not worth it." But the feeling didn't subside, it only grew stronger. I knew it was her, the original Eleanor. She couldn't let it go. I knew she and the boy had shared innocent childhood memories. For Eleanor, Liam was different. He had been a ray of light in her dark life. He symbolized a beautiful future, a symbol of hope. And now, to know that those beautiful memories were fake, the future was fake, the hope was fake, and that the handsome, elegant boy was rotten to the core. How could she not be heartbroken? I understood her. But this really wasn't the time to be sad. Facing Liam, I had to be on high alert. I forced down the emotions bubbling up from the original Eleanor, and looked up to meet Liam's affectionate gaze. I was unmoved. I already knew from her memories what this man was capable of. He could look at a pig with that much intensity. Such a good actor. "Eleanor, does your heart hurt?" he asked with concern, noticing my hand on my chest. I didn't answer his question. Instead, I stared at him, my eyes gradually filling with sorrow. "Liam, do you have any idea what I've been through these past few days?" My question caught him off guard. He instinctively replied, "What's happened to you recently?" He didn't think I'd be suffering at home. On the contrary, the news he'd received was that I was thriving, that even Mrs. Chun had to steer clear of me. So he was genuinely confused. My gaze was mournful as I gently pushed him away. "You don't care about me at all. It's been so long, and not a single word from you. I could be tormented to death by that Mrs. Chun, and you wouldn't even know." Liam didn't understand, but he knew he should play along. "Eleanor, please tell me what happened." I dredged up sad memories from the past and started crying, my voice full of sorrow. "I'm ruined. I can't get married anymore. My virtue is gone. It's all Mrs. Chen's fault. She did this to me. She deserves to die." Liam was stunned. He grabbed my hand, his voice urgent. "Eleanor, what are you saying? You said you're not a virgin anymore?" I trembled as I cried, nodding slowly. A flicker of joy crossed Liam's face, his lips curling up before he quickly suppressed it as I looked up at him. "But didn't they say the whole bandit thing was just a rumor?" "No, Liam, it wasn't. I can't go on like this. Father covered it up for the family's reputation, but the truth is, I'm no longer a virgin. If I marry someone in the future, what will happen on my wedding night when my husband finds out? The third prince has been visiting Father a lot recently, and it seems Father intends to marry me to him. But I can't." I started crying again, stamping my foot in frustration and covering my face. That would be deceiving the royal family. What am I going to do? Liam understood everything now. He was both shocked and thrilled. He squeezed my hand tightly. "Eleanor, listen to me. Why don't you marry me?" "Ha." I feigned surprise, tears still clinging to my lashes, looking as if that thought had never crossed my mind. Liam wiped the tears from my eyes, his gaze full of sincerity. "Eleanor, I've wanted to marry you since we were children. You are the most wonderful girl in my heart. If the Prime Minister would consent to our marriage, I would be eternally grateful and would never, ever let you down." I pretended to be overjoyed, my tears turning to a smile. "That would be wonderful. Liam, you don't mind?" I'm so happy. I knew you truly cared for me. When will you propose? I'll go home right now and tell my parents. I'll ask them to make the arrangements. Eleanor, don't worry. Just wait for me. Okay. I'll wait for you. I clutched his sleeve and added, Liam, my secret. Besides my father, you're the only one who knows. Please, don't tell your parents. If they find out their future daughter-in-law is already, I don't think I could live with myself. Eleanor, don't worry. I promise I won't say a word. Liam, you're the best. Teary-eyed, I waved my handkerchief as I watched him hurry away. The moment he was gone, I wiped my face and my expression went blank. The show was about to begin. Liam had long been allied with Mrs. Chun. My run-in with the bandits was his doing. But it was clear from their plan that they didn't want me dead, they just wanted my reputation destroyed. Now that was interesting. In other words, a living me was more valuable to them than a dead me. And from Liam's reaction, I gathered something else. A disgraced me was more valuable to them than a pristine me. From these two known facts, combined with the function of a high society woman in this era, I could deduce Liam's intentions. As the son of a mid-level official, he was a nobody, with no titles or accomplishments to his name. He was no match for me, the Prime Minister's daughter. If we hadn't attended the same elite academy as children, a boy like him would never have had the right to even approach me. Class barriers exist in every era. Nothing new there. And Liam wanted to cross that barrier. So he wanted to marry me. It had nothing to do with love. He just wanted to use me as a stepping stone to reach for higher fruit. But my father was the Prime Minister. How could the Prime Minister's daughter marry the son of a minor official? Besides, using the Prime Minister's daughter as a stepping stone was outrageously arrogant. He never dared to show such ambitions to anyone. He knew he couldn't decide my marriage, so he went to Mrs. Chun. He saw her resentment towards me and knew that she would do anything to see me ruined and suffering, as long as I was still alive. He and Mrs. Chun were a perfect match. Together, they would have pushed the original Eleanor to the brink of death. And then he would have proposed marriage. It would have been an easy success. In this society, a noblewoman didn't necessarily have to die after losing her honor. But that was only if she had a family willing to protect her. Eleanor didn't. So if Eleanor didn't want to die, her only choice would have been to marry him. His plan was perfectly calculated. And what I wanted was for him to execute that plan perfectly, so the real show could begin. Sure enough, a few days later, Liam's father, the official Mr. Liam, came to our house to formally propose marriage. It wasn't Mrs. Chun who received him, but my father. After a month of massive spending on my dresses, jewelry, parties, and investments in socialite clubs, my father had already invested too much in me to back out now. He may not have put much effort into raising me, but he had spent a lot of money. So he couldn't trust Mrs. Chun with my marriage arrangements. He couldn't risk her making all his money go to waste. He had to personally vet every potential suitor, weighing the options to find the one that would maximize his own benefit. He had to make sure he could sell me at the highest price before he could rest easy. So when Mr. Liam showed up to propose, my father's face immediately soured. The son of a mere fifth-rank official, his status was far too low. But as a seasoned politician, my father wasn't some vulgar snob. Even though he had already mentally rejected the proposal, he still received Mr. Liam politely. After listening to Mr. Liam's speech, my father gave the standard, polite refusal about not wanting to part with his beloved daughter and wanting to keep me by his side for a couple more years. The meeting should have ended amicably, with some small talk about state affairs. Anyone who has been in politics for a while knows how to read between the lines. But who would have thought that after my father politely declined, Mr. Liam's expression would change completely? He then tried to persuade my father again, shamelessly. My father still politely refused. Mr. Liam gripped the arms of his chair, continuing to push his son on my father. My father refused a third time, waving his hand to signal he was done with the topic. Let's just have some tea. Tea. Finally, Mr. Liam looked around, saw no one was near, and leaned in close to my father, whispering something. The servant spying on the meeting didn't hear what he said, but everyone knew what happened next. My father erupted in fury, throwing his hot tea directly in Mr. Liam's face. "You insolent fool! How dare you speak such nonsense? You dare to insult my family's honor. You deserve to die. You deserve to die. Mr. Liam yelped in pain from the hot tea, clutching his reddened face and shouting something about only we know about this. If you agree, no one else will ever find out. Before my father had him gagged, beaten, and thrown out of the house. After kicking him out, my father angrily ordered the Liamards to never let anyone from the Liam family in again. He then stormed back to his study to write a formal complaint, preparing to denounce Mr. Liam in court the next morning. Listening to the servant's report, I smiled, my jade pestle steadily grinding the bright red flower petals in the mortar. Joy was adding camellia seed oil for me, while Molly leaned on the table, watching me work, her voice full of admiration. My lady, your hands are so beautiful. I freed one hand and tapped Molly between the eyebrows. That's all you ever notice. Joy giggled. Molly's always been like that. She sticks to whoever is the prettiest. She's been a sucker for a pretty face since she was a kid. Sucker for a pretty face was a term I'd taught them. Ever since they learned it, they'd been gleefully calling each other that. I looked at my own hands and had to agree. They were quite beautiful. Slender, pale fingers. They looked elegant no matter what they were doing. The original Eleanor's beauty was evident even in her hands. And they said her beauty was only a fraction of her own mother's. One can only imagine what a breathtaking beauty Eleanor's mother must have been. But in this cruel world, a woman who is too gentle, no matter how beautiful, cannot survive for long. The reason Mrs. hated Eleanor so much was likely because of her mother. Eleanor's existence was a constant reminder to her husband of the stunningly beautiful wife he once had. So Mrs. tormented Eleanor relentlessly, as if making her miserable would somehow make her superior to the ghost of her husband's first love. How pathetic. The maids teased each other, and I listened quietly, my hand moving rhythmically, grinding the petals, my thoughts 1,000 miles away. My lady, that should be enough. Let me sift it for you, Molly's bright voice said beside me. I snapped back to reality and instinctively handed her the mortar. Molly, oblivious, took it, poured out the flour powder, and began to sift it carefully. Joy noticed my distraction. My lady, are you all right? Are you worried about Mr. Liam's proposal? I shook my head and smiled faintly. Yes and no. My lady, I don't understand. Father is already writing a complaint against Mr. Liam, but tomorrow at court, he's in for a real surprise. Did he think beating the man up, throwing him out, and filing a complaint would be the end of it? Oh, my naive old father. This is just the beginning. The real show is about to start. He'll soon find out just how disliamsting the Liam family can be. Just as I expected. The next day's court session was a dramatic back and forth, escalating to the point of almost becoming a physical brawl. Just as my father was about to present his complaint against Mr. Liam beat him to it, pulling out his own report to denounce my father. My father was stunned. He'd been an official for years and had seen it all, but he had never encountered someone so utterly shameless. In the grand hall, in front of all the civil and military officials, Mr. Liam declared that the Prime Minister's daughter, Eleanor, had been abducted and lost her virtue. He claimed she was no longer a virgin, and was probably pregnant with some bandit's bastard child. And yet, my father was trying to marry this soiled woman to the third prince, a blatant act of deceiving the throne. My father was so furious he was practically jumping up and down. My daughter has always been well-behaved and virtuous. She is pure, as heaven is my witness. Furthermore, in the presence of His Majesty, how dare you, you old scoundrel, slander a good woman's name with such lies? Yesterday, I beat you for your outrageous claims, and you still haven't learned your lesson. Today you dare to spew this filth again. I'll kill you. With that, my father rolled up his sleeves and charged. Mr. Liam, having been on the receiving end of my father's fists the day before, knew my father was not only a scholar, but also knew a thing or two about fighting. Seeing my father coming at him like a ferocious tiger, he immediately ducked behind a military general and refused to show his face. My father tried to get to him, but the general blocked his way, so he just kept chasing him in circles. With the general at the center, my father and Mr. Liam began a ridiculous game of chase around the pillar. The dignity of the court was in tatters. Some ministers watched, some tried to break it up, and some just snickered. Besides the poor general, no one actually tried to intervene. Everyone was too busy enjoying the show. Finally, the emperor stepped in to mediate, and my father reluctantly gave up his quest to beat Mr. Liam to a pulp. But then he turned around, ran to the foot of the throne, slid to his knees, and started banging his head on the floor, crying out, "Your Majesty, I have been wronged. I beg you to deliver justice. My beloved daughter, whom I have cherished like a precious jewel, who has never even had a scratch on her, is now being viciously slandered by this villain. A good girl's reputation is being destroyed just like that. This is meant to drive her to her death. Your Majesty, you must help me. I have been grievously wronged, Your Majesty. Grievously wronged." My father's performance was a masterclass in theatrics, a seamless blend of speech and action. The final cry of "grievously wronged" was delivered with a rising, drawn-out wail that made everyone listening shiver. The emperor looked like he had a massive headache. Seeing the prime minister weeping at his feet, refusing to get up, the emperor was in a bind. He didn't know whether to help him up or not. He could only shoot a venomous glare at Mr. Liam, setting aside whether the girl was actually a virgin or not. Even if she had been assaulted by bandits, that was her family's business. What did it have to do with this old fool? But the emperor couldn't say that out loud in court. Fortunately, this wasn't the first time the emperor had been in this position. He could see there were many twists and turns to this story, so he wasn't about to make a hasty judgment. Looking at the prime minister's trembling shoulders, the emperor said in a deep voice, "A young lady's virtue is no small matter, nor should it be publicly debated. We will adjourn for today. This matter will be discussed later." After court, my father immediately returned home and summoned me to his study. I walked into his study, gracefully smoothed my dress, stood still and curtsied. "Greetings, father. I hope you are well." My father waved his hand, telling me to dispense with the formalities. "Eleanor, there is something I must ask you. I need you to be completely honest." I smiled calmly. "Please ask, father. Are you or are you not still a virgin?" His tone was harsh, and he bit down hard on the word virgin. I maintained my serene smile. "I am. Eleanor, if you have truly lost your virtue, you must not be afraid. Tell me the truth, and I can still find a way to cover for you. Otherwise, when the palace sends a matron to examine you, if you are found not to be a virgin, our entire family will be in peril." I nodded to show I understood. My father looked at me with a mixture of hope and fear. "Eleanor, I will ask you one more time. Are you a virgin?" "Yes." I nodded with poise, grace, and composure. My father let out a huge sigh of relief. "Good. In that case, we have nothing to fear from a palace examination." "That would be unwise, father." I cut off his sigh of relief and said seriously, on the basis of Mr. Liam's words alone, "I, the Prime Minister's daughter, must submit to such a humiliating examination? Today, one person questions my virtue, tomorrow another? Must I be examined every time to prove my innocence? Father, if we so easily agree to this, I'm afraid that even if I am proven to be a virgin, my reputation will be tarnished forever." My father's face grew grave again. "You are right, Eleanor." He stood up abruptly and paced around the study, his brow furrowed with even deeper worry. "But if we don't agree to the examination, how can you prove your innocence and restore your reputation?" "Father, proving my innocence is pointless. If we fall into the trap of self-vindication, we will be caught in an endless cycle of it. Let's not even consider whether the palace matron could be bribed to lie. Even if she confirms my innocence, what if someone accuses you of bribing her? And if that matron is later bribed to testify against you, how will you prove your innocence then?" Listening to my string of questions, my father increasingly felt that the path of self-vindication was indeed a trap. The moment you start trying to prove your innocence, you are automatically putting yourself in a weaker position, because everything you do is for the sake of gaining others' approval. To place yourself in a position of weakness, hoping for a fair judgment from others, is never a good choice. I was being short-sighted. "Thank goodness you are so meticulous, Eleanor. Then what do you think we should do?" I leaned in and whispered a few words in my father's ear. At first, his eyes widened in shock. Then he chuckled in amazement. Finally, his eyes crinkled with delight, and he clapped his hands in approval. "Eleanor, you truly are a brilliant woman. Only you could come up with such a shocking plan. The title of brilliant woman is just a joke among friends, not to be taken seriously. Father, this plan has far-reaching consequences. One wrong move, and we could provoke public outrage. But since the Liam family wants to tarnish our name, we can't be the only ones to suffer. Exactly. Why should only our family be dragged through the mud? Falsely accusing the Prime Minister's daughter of losing her virtue is already shocking enough. So let's make it even bigger. Let's muddy the waters even more. My father threw his head back and laughed. He immediately left the house. He was going to submit a report to the Emperor, to give him a heads up. Behind me, Joy whispered worriedly, "My lady, will the Emperor really agree to such a plan?" I stood there for a long time, watching my father's retreating Philiamra. He will. From the fragmented information I had about this world, I knew the Emperor was a dark, unhinged man. On the surface, he seemed magnanimous and tolerant. This was reflected in how he never demanded people avoid using his name, nor did he stop the creation of stories that rewrote him in various ways. So everyone said he was a good emperor. However, his true personality was far from the gentle image he presented to the public. He was the son of the former empress, who had died when he was young. He was not the current Empress Dowager's biological son. If the Dowager hadn't been childless and eventually adopted him, this awkward, motherless prince who was not favored by his father, he would have lost his position as crown prince long ago. There was even a secret rumor that the former empress was murdered, and that the current emperor had witnessed his mother's tragic death as a child. This story was so outlandish that few believed it, but I, as a transmigrator, knew this rumor was the hidden truth. After such a childhood, even a normal person would become twisted and dark. Not to mention that after ascending the throne, the emperor had to deal with the constant pressure from the entire court of officials. This made him outwardly gentle and patient, but inwardly, he was filled with rage. He eventually channeled this conflict and pain into all sorts of rebellious and unorthodox behavior. For example, he once suddenly declared he would take a pregnant woman into the palace as a concubine. He went through with it despite the fierce opposition from the entire court and the risk of confusing the royal bloodline. Another example, his relationship with his adoptive mother, the current Empress Dowager, was not exactly warm. He only respected her on the surface, while at the same time, he gave power in the harem to another of the late emperor's less favored concubines, consort. The Empress Dowager, to show her anger, announced she was leaving the palace to pray, but in reality, she created a lot of public opinion, subtly suggesting the emperor was unfilial, trying to force him to humble himself and bring her back. But after 5 years, she could only return in disgrace, continuing to share power with consort as if nothing had happened. An emperor like this, sensitive, paranoid, rebellious, and unhinged, it's a wonder how he managed to maintain a reputation for being tolerant and magnanimous among the common people. My only liamus was his intense desire to find and establish his own identity. So my proposal would not only help him suppress the entire body of officials, but also allow him to assert himself and leave a significant mark on history. Even if it wasn't a positive one, it would certainly be unprecedented. I think he'll agree. The truth is, this emperor's heart is incredibly rebellious. You can see it in how he once tried to bring a pregnant woman into the palace as a concubine. He didn't even care about the serious risk of tainting the royal bloodline. It just goes to show that his tolerant exterior is all a lie. In reality, he's a once-in-a-century madman. He'll agree, I said calmly. The next day, Mr. Liam, as expected, brought up the old issue again, demanding that the Prime Minister's daughter, Eleanor, prove her innocence for all to see. The Emperor replied, "No problem. I'll send an experienced matron from the palace to examine her." But then another official stood up and objected, "This plan is flawed. The Prime Minister's family is powerful. What if he bribes the matron beforehand, or uses some underhanded means to coerce her into lying? Wouldn't that be deceiving your majesty and committing a great crime?" The surrounding officials all nodded in agreement. My father, listening to these baseless accusations, would have exploded in anger if I hadn't prepped him. He hadn't even done anything, and he was already being accused of deceiving the throne. These bastards, killing without a sword, just with their words. They could pin a crime on you without a shred of evidence. How despicable. How infuriating. How hateful. My father gripped his ceremonial tablet, silently chanting to himself, "Don't lie with fools. Don't lie with fools." The emperor, having been briefed by my father the day before, was not at all flustered by this challenge. He feigned hesitation, pondering for a moment, then broke into a smile. "In that case, let's have all of you esteemed ministers bring your unmarried daughters here for an examination as well." Silence. A dead silence. Everyone was dumbfounded. For a moment, no one responded. At first, the officials thought they had misheard. It was only when the emperor repeated himself that their hopes were finally crushed. They hadn't misheard. Had the emperor gone mad? While the officials were still dazed, the emperor pressed his advantage. First, the emperor believed it was against protocol to demand a noblewoman undergo an examination based solely on Mr. Liam's one-sided claims. But since Mr. Liam, as an official, had raised such a doubt, the emperor couldn't ignore it. After weighing the options, the emperor decided an examination was fine, but it couldn't be just for the prime minister's daughter. Since Mr. Liam had made such a reputation-damaging accusation against another family's daughter, he should also bring his own unmarried daughters to be examined alongside her. As for the other ministers who agreed with Mr. Liam and thought he had done nothing wrong, the same rule would apply. They were all to bring their unmarried daughters for a group examination. As soon as these words were spoken, the court was filled with cries of despair. The officials who had been watching from the sidelines with schadenfreude yesterday finally understood what it meant to be in someone else's shoes. My father stood at the very front, stroking his beard, and let out a soft sigh. "Today it's me, tomorrow it'll be you." The officials nearby who heard him couldn't help but shudder. The ministers who were called out refused to accept it. They all knelt, begging the emperor not to involve their innocent daughters. Some even started turning on Mr. Liam, cursing him for being improper and for obsessing over what was under a young girl's skirt. How shameful. The emperor watched with satisfaction as more than half the court wailed in protest, a grin spreading across his face. "Don't worry. I will also arrange for some young palace maids to join the examination. All the girls will wear veils, and no talking will be allowed, to prevent cheating. I will also assign more than one matron to ensure there are no mistakes." The officials cried out for the emperor to retract his order, but he was unmoved. One stubborn official tried to Liam, but before he could even get a word out, his Liam clapped a hand over his mouth and pushed his head to the ground. "Shut up. Isn't this mess big enough already?" The emperor said with a tone of deep wisdom, "I just want all of you, my dear ministers, to understand the meaning of leading by example. If one can accuse another without evidence, relying solely on words to level a grave charge, then that is not justice, but a personal attack. In my court, I do not wish to see my officials engaging in personal attacks instead of actual work. This matter is decided. Court is dismissed." Hearing the emperor's words, the officials were horrified, their minds screaming, "You crazy emperor, what right do you have to say such things? Have you forgotten all the outrageous things you've done yourself? And now you're using it to control us." The officials were seething with anger, but the emperor was delighted. He rattled off his speech and then, ignoring the wails of the officials behind him, he walked back to his private quarters with a spring in his step. This was too much fun. He had to discuss it with the empress and draw up a detailed, unassailable examination procedure to shut those people up for good. He was going to show those annoying officials that when it came to being unhinged, he was dead serious. Half a month later, the day of the examination that had filled the ministers with dread arrived. The examination was overseen by the empress and the 4 highest-ranking consorts. The matrons assigned to perform the examinations were from 5 different factions, each monitoring the others, making bribery and fraud impossible. Additionally, a head scribe, directly under the emperor's command, was sent with 5 teams of palace maids to act as supervisors and maintain order. The examination was held in the Palace of Emerging Talent. Outside the palace, eunuchs stood with their backs to the building, forming a human wall to prevent any peeping toms from climbing over. Inside, palace maids were stationed at every wall to prevent anyone from sneaking in to watch. The young women undergoing the examination had to register in advance, writing down their own names and their parents' names, and providing a full set of 10 fingerprints for later comparison. If there were any with the same name, they had to be clearly distinguished. Even twins were not to be confused. The register of the young women was controlled by the Emperor's scribe team, and its contents were strictly confidential. The Empress and the 4 consorts were not allowed to see it. Each young woman had to wear a veil, a wide-brimmed hat, and a uniform that covered most of her body. During the examination, only the necessary parts would be exposed. In fact, when many of the noble girls put on the uniform and saw that the ugly garment covered everything except for a hole in the crotch, they burst into tears. They had been pampered their whole lives, given the moon and the stars. When had they ever suffered such humiliation? To be treated like livestock, without any dignity. What did they think they were? The young women, not yet called in for the examination, stood in the courtyard of the palace, huddling together in small groups, sobbing. It's all because of that Mr. Liam. He had to go and say the Prime Minister's daughter wasn't a virgin. And now all of us have to go through this. It's ridiculous. The Prime Minister's daughter has been at home this whole time. She only goes out for high society parties and comes back the same day. How could she have been abducted by bandits? Kidnapped in the morning and released at night? What a joke. He couldn't even bother to come up with a better story. Exactly. And besides, whether she's a virgin or not, what business is it of his? It's not like she was going to marry into his family. I heard his daughters are here to be examined too. Who are they? Where are they? Find them. I'm going to give them a piece of my mind. The courtyard was in an uproar, on the verge of a massive brawl, until the stern-faced head scribe arrived with her inspection team to restore order. This is the palace. No shouting. The noble girls were indignant, but didn't dare to cause trouble. They obediently allowed the scribe to arrange them into several lines. If anyone whispers again, their name will be reported to the court for all the officials to hear which family has raised such a well-mannered daughter. The scribe's threat sent a chill down their spines. They lowered their heads and didn't dare to look around anymore. The scribe, seeing the silence, was finally satisfied. Registration is complete. The examination will now begin. First line, enter. Inside the main hall of the palace, a dozen matrons stood in a row, their hearts pounding with anxiety. They each belonged to different factions, serving the Empress and the 4 consorts, and each had her own allegiances. But today they all shared a common worry and anxiety. This intense anxiety made them twist their handkerchiefs in their hands. The reason was simple. They had just found out today that their own granddaughters were in the group to be examined. This was a decision made by the Emperor to ensure fairness and impartiality, to make these matrons treat this matter with the utmost seriousness. After all, a woman's reputation was at stake and could not be taken lightly. The matrons' palms were sweating so much they were soaking their handkerchiefs. They were terrified. Why? Because it was impossible to tell who was a virgin and who wasn't just by looking. Yesterday, I had stressed to my father that he must follow my plan, blow the situation up, and drag all the other officials into it. Most importantly, he had to ensure that every examining matron's granddaughter was included in the examination. And this information could only be revealed to the matrons on the day of the examination, not a moment sooner. Although my father didn't understand why I was so insistent, he trusted my strategic thinking and did as I asked. The Emperor, always one to enjoy a good show, naturally agreed. Only I knew why this was so crucial. Because virginity is something you can't actually test for. There's nothing to test. No way to verify. Why? Because the hymen comes in all shapes and sizes. There's no standard model. And the hymen naturally has an opening. It's perfectly normal. If it didn't, how would a woman menstruate? Furthermore, the hymen is elastic. In other words, even if a penis has been inside, as long as it isn't unusually large and the act isn't overly rough, the hymen won't tear. It will look the same afterward as it did before, perfectly intact. Some women are even born without a hymen. And finally, the most mind-blowing fact. The hymen can heal itself. It's human tissue. After all, of course it can self-repair. As long as it's not completely torn into several pieces. Even if the hymen is slightly injured and bleeds a little, it can heal on its own. So, as long as a woman isn't having sex frequently, isn't being examined right after sex, or isn't being examined right after a rough tearing before she has had time to heal. It's basically impossible to tell who is a virgin and who isn't. When I first arrived, the original Eleanor had just died. After I settled into the Prime Minister's residence, I examined my own body. Let's just say, it was perfectly intact. If it weren't for the fact that she was underage and the act was so violent, she probably wouldn't have even bled. So, after returning to the residence, I focused on healing. The only evidence of the assault was the bruises on my body. But after a month of diligently applying ointment and taking care of myself, those marks were long gone. If I had been forced into an examination on the day I returned, they might have found something. But now, no matter who examined me, I was, for all intents and purposes, a pure, untouched virgin. These examining matrons had practical experience in the palace. But their practical experience was based on the 4 methods of diagnosis: looking, listening, questioning, and feeling the pulse. Among these, questioning was a very important criterion. In other words, interrogation. These matrons would use various conversational tactics to lead the target into revealing a weakness. But such tactics could also easily lead to misjudgment. After all, when a person is nervous, even if they are innocent, they can appear quite liability. More importantly, these matrons often made their judgments based on which way the wind was blowing. If everyone present believed the target had lost her virtue, the matron would likely go along with it and declare her not a virgin. So the so-called examination was full of subjectivity and corruption. That's why these matrons were now sweating bullets. First, their most reliable tool, interrogation, was off the table. Talking was forbidden on site to prevent revealing the target's identity and compromising the fairness of the process. Second, they couldn't identify the target based on physical characteristics, because every girl was wearing a uniform that concealed everything but the necessary parts. Third, even if they wanted to go with the flow, they couldn't tell who Eleanor was, so how could they know which way the wind was blowing? Finally, their own granddaughters were in the mix. Even if they wanted to randomly point a finger at a girl to prove their professional competence, they wouldn't dare do it with their own family members in the group. What if they picked the wrong one? They would have ruined their own grandchild's life. So the matrons were truly in a bind. They didn't dare ask their superiors to allow a questioning session, because if they made such a request, a certain unhinged individual would surely ask, "Why do you need to ask questions? Can't you just examine them?" How would they answer that? Were they supposed to say, "I'm sorry, but we can't actually tell just by looking"? With some interrogation, we might probably be able to trick 1 or 2 of them into confessing. If they dared to say that, their careers in the palace would be over. They might as well be dragged out and buried. The thought of their entire families being ruined by one wrong move made the matrons shudder violently. And at that moment, the first line of girls filed in. The mood in the court today was tense. No one was speaking. Everyone was silently waiting for news from the inner palace. Before long, a young eunuch came to report. "Your Majesty, the count is complete. All the women on the list are present. They have been divided into 10 lines, and the first line has already gone in." The eunuch presented the register. The emperor took it, casually placed it aside without looking at it, and dismissed the eunuch. Hearing that the examination had been Liam and the first line of girls was inside, the officials nervously wiped their sweat. Who knew if their own daughter was in that first line? After about the time it takes to drink 2 cups of tea, the eunuch finally returned with a report. "Your Majesty, the first line has been examined. And the result? All are virgins." Excellent. The officials breathed a small sigh of relief, their clenched jaws relaxing slightly. They continued to wait. Another 2 cups of tea later, the eunuch returned again. "Your Majesty, the second line has been examined. All are virgins." Splendid. The emperor was very pleased and dismissed the eunuch. This repeated several times, and each time the report was the same. Virgins, all of them virgins. The officials gradually relaxed. The morning court session was long over, but not a single official had left. They all remained standing and waiting. By the 10th time the eunuch came to report, the familiar phrase "all are virgins" was heard, and a collective sigh of relief echoed through the hall. The emperor looked around and saw everyone secretly wiping their sweat. except for the Prime Minister, who stood at the very front, calm and composed from beginning to end, a stark contrast to the anxious officials. The Emperor smiled and nodded. My dear Minister, I see you have been unperturbed this whole time. It seems you have great confidence in your child. My father proudly raised his head and bowed with restraint. Your Majesty is too kind. Though I am not a great man, I believe my family's principles are sound. My eldest daughter, especially, is intelligent and self-possessed. She would never do anything to betray your grace. Good. Excellent. The Emperor clapped his hands and laughed. He immediately issued a decree, bestowing upon Eleanor, the eldest daughter of the Ning family, the title of Princess Qingping, with an estate of 1,500 households, and rewarding her with 100 taels of gold, a jade coral sculpture, a jade scepter, and a bushel of luminous pearls. My father immediately knelt to thank the Emperor, proclaiming, "Long live your Majesty." The other officials watched with envy but dared not say another word. This examination fiasco had thoroughly scared them all. Seeing the civil and military officials cowering like quails, no longer chattering and debating as they usually did, the Emperor smiled with satisfaction. The decree bestowing my princess title arrived at our home with my father when he returned from court. My father, beaming with joy, led the entire family to kneel and thank the Emperor. Watching me accept the royal decree, watching the rewards being carried into my courtyard one by one, and hearing the eunuch respectfully address me as Your Highness, Mrs. Chen's face twisted with rage. But she could do nothing to me anymore. After seeing the eunuch off, my father immediately summoned me to his study. I didn't go right away. Instead, I held the decree and walked slowly over to Mrs. Chen, a slight smile on my lips. Mother, I've been made a princess. Are you happy for me? Mrs. Chen clutched her own daughter tightly, not answering, just glaring at me. My smile widened. I savored her furious yet helpless expression before turning and heading to my father's study. As soon as I entered, my father clapped his hands and laughed. Eleanor, you truly are my brilliant strategist. You perfectly predicted the minister's reactions, the emperor's thoughts, and the power dynamics of the palace. A true talent, a great talent. After this, not only is our family's reputation unharmed, but we've also won the emperor's favor and gained immense prestige. Ha ha ha. Let those old fools be jealous. None of them could raise a daughter as brilliant as you. I lowered my head and smiled without saying a word. My father chuckled to himself for a while, then remembered I had been standing there for some time. He quickly pulled over a chair and helped me sit. You must be tired from standing. Sit. You don't need to be so formal with me. Thank you for the seat, father. I quickly stood up, curtsied to him, and then sat down again. Seeing my caution, my father laughed again. Well, you're right. You are Princess Qingping now. Your every word and action must be flawless. It's good that you're so careful. The other children in the family should learn from you. If they were half as smart and self-possessed as you, I wouldn't have to worry about anything. I nodded. You are right, father. I also have a matter to discuss with you. Speak. My father gestured for me to speak freely while he went to the tea table to prepare some tea for me. Father, the matter of my virtue is now settled. Mr. Liam can no longer use it against us. But we have made an enemy of the Liam family. If we don't eliminate them completely, I fear they will cause endless trouble in the future. My father's busy back stiffened for a moment. Then his nonchalant voice drifted over. Don't worry, Eleanor. That old fool Mr. Liam is just a minor fifth-rank official. Father, I'm afraid the Liam family is more than just a minor official. I took the cup of tea my father handed me, took a small sip, and said softly, Father, when I was abducted by bandits not long ago, do you know what my grandfather's men did besides killing the bandits? My father frowned. What did they do? They searched the entire bandit hideout and found these letters. I took out the evidence of Liam's collusion with the bandits and showed it to my father. My father read through the letters one by one, his frown deepening. This is not right. How could the Liam family possibly? Exactly. No matter how you look at it, the Liam family doesn't seem capable of supporting such a large bandit operation. Mr. Liam's salary is barely enough to support his own family, let alone so many bandits. The Liam family has a backer. My father's eyes grew colder. I nodded. That's right. And this person's power in the court is definitely not low. Counting on our fingers, it could only be one of a few people. Father. I looked up, my gaze meaningful as I met his cold, wary eyes. You need to plan ahead. My father thought for 3 days, then summoned me to his study again. Eleanor, there are no clear signs of a succession struggle yet. It would be too reckless for us to choose a side now. I think we should wait. I wasn't surprised. After all, this old fox loved to play the part of a loyal, neutral minister in public. I didn't say much. I just led my father to my courtyard. In the flower bed, I had placed a pot with 2 saplings planted in it. Father, look. He glanced at it, confused. What are you growing? It doesn't matter what they are. I pointed to the pot and said gravely, what matters is that this pot can only support 1 sapling. The other will inevitably be removed. Right now, I'm just waiting for them to compete for the soil's nutrients. Waiting for one to emerge victorious. Then I will pull out the weaker one, and let the stronger winner have the pot all to itself. My father clearly understood what I was getting at. Annoyed by my audacity, he shot me a cold glare. I was unfazed and continued, Father, the moment I planted the 2nd sapling, the struggle began. And as they grow, the fight is destined to become more intense. Father, think about it. People are always eager to add to a brocade, but few are willing to offer charcoal in a snowstorm. With that, I bowed to my father and turned to leave. My father stood before the flower pot, staring at the 2 saplings, silent for a long time. Another 3 days later, my father summoned me again. This time, as soon as he saw me, he said, You were right, Eleanor. The struggle has already begun. It's just not out in the open yet. But if we wait until it's in full swing to join, there might not be a place for us. I smiled without a word. This old fox, what an act. He had already been secretly meeting with the 3rd prince, planning a marriage alliance. Even that old fool Mr. Liam knew about it. And he was still pretending to be a loyal, neutral minister in front of me. To get him to open up, I had to persuade him, plant trees for him, and wait a full 6 days. And even now, he was still putting on a show. My father, unaware that I had already seen through his gambler's nature, put on a troubled expression. But the situation is very unclear right now. All the major families are waiting and watching. It's very dangerous to choose a side rashly. Where should we even begin? I watched him perform, a cold smile on my lips. He actually had another option. He could choose not to fight and remain a loyal minister. But if he did, he would have to face a very likely outcome. A new emperor would ascend the throne. And with a new ruler comes a new court. The new emperor would promote all the ministers who supported him to important positions. And my father, the high-ranking loyal minister, would be kicked out of his position as prime minister for his lack of contribution, or even for his refusal to take a side. After all, only a magnanimous and wise ruler would tolerate and even value a neutral minister. But how many wise rulers are there in history? My father didn't dare to gamble on the new emperor's character. Once he was kicked out, the Ning family would go from extreme wealth to poverty. Old rivals like Mr. Liam could very well become his superiors, trampling him underfoot. How could my father bear that? He couldn't. He couldn't even stand to think about it. So he had to fight. And he had to win. See, human nature is so easy to manipulate. Our paths are determined by our character. Eleanor, what do you think? Where should we start to be safe? My father asked again, seeing me lost in thought. I snapped out of my reverie, looked up at him and smiled brightly. Father, marry me to the Liam family. My father. I knew my father must think I was crazy. But his years in politics had taught him the art of maintaining a poker face. So, as shocking as my words were, they didn't crack his mask. He watched me with a deep, suspicious gaze. I knew what he was thinking. My dear Prime Minister father was, at his core, a gambler. He was born into a noble family, but they had fallen on hard times. The wealth and glory he had enjoyed in his youth vanished during his years of hard study. Along with his family's fortune, his first wife also perished. A beauty like my mother could only be obtained by a noble family. When my father was no longer a nobleman, my mother, a peony that required wealth and pampering, withered away. My mother's death symbolized the end of the lavish life my father had grown up with and was accustomed to. So he had no time to grieve for her. He knew he couldn't live a poor life. He had to find a way to get back to his former position, and fast. But in this dog-eat-dog world with its rigid class structure, once you fall, it's not so easy to climb back up. To get back into the circle of wealth and influence in a short amount of time, my father's only option was to gamble. Not at a casino, but with his own life. He chose Mrs., the daughter of the richest man in Hangzhou. He bet his entire future on her. And he won. Mrs. was a romantic fool. She could have controlled her husband, kept him from rising too high, and made him spend his whole life begging for her favor. But instead, she poured her entire family's resources into supporting him, helping him become the prime minister by the time he was in his 40s. She gave him everything, but he never gave her the respect and love she deserved. Because in his eyes, all his power and wealth were the result of his own successful gamble, not something he had begged for. My father won, and he believed it was his own skill, not his wife's love for him. Gamblers are terrifying. And what's more terrifying than a gambler is a gambler who has won before. And what's more terrifying than a gambler who has won before? A gambler who has won so much that it's beyond what his class should allow. So my dear father had gotten used to gambling. He even sought it out, using any means necessary. His intelligence, combined with his family's background and most importantly, Mrs. Chen's family's wealth, had made him a winner every time. For decades, my father's path had been smooth. He had hardly suffered at all. So he believed. Gambling was right. Gambling was necessary. He had to keep gambling. If he won, the Ning family would become royalty. After all, he had already achieved the highest ranks of nobility. But human greed is infinite. For my father, who was already at the pinnacle of power, it was inevitable that he would want to climb higher. Just as a prince will inevitably vie for the throne. And to become part of the royal family, he needed a good stepping stone, a good pawn. That stepping stone used to be Mrs. Chen. Now it was me. Ever since I had shown my unusual cunning, my father had belied to realize I was different from his other children. He saw that I could be a much better pawn. If he had once seen me as a mere pawn, now I was a rook. A pawn could only become a concubine, but a rook could aim for the queen's position. My father's gambler's heart began to stir again, rubbing his hands together in anticipation. He wanted to gamble on the entire kingdom, on the throne itself. He was betting that the next crown prince would come from my womb. The thought made his blood boil. So how could he possibly let such an important piece fall into a dead end like the Liam family? He was waiting to use this rook to conquer the board. I didn't immediately explain why I wanted him to marry me to the Liam family. I first went to the tea table, poured him a cup of tea, brought it to him, and then stood behind him, gently massaging his shoulders. Father, didn't Mr. Liam say in court that you were close to the third prince and wanted to marry me to him? I assume you've already discussed this with the third prince privately, haven't you? My father didn't respond to my probing question. His breathing was even, as if he had fallen asleep. I continued to massage his shoulders. The emperor is delaying naming a crown prince because none of the current eligible princes are his ideal choice. The officials have already clashed with the emperor over this. The number of officials who have been punished for urging him to name a successor is more than you can count on one hand. There have even been one or two who were beaten to death. If you were to marry me to the third prince, the most popular candidate for crown prince, at this critical juncture, whether as his primary wife or a concubine, you would be openly defying the emperor. Father, the fate of your predecessors who lost the emperor's favor is a lesson to be learned. My father's hand on the table suddenly trembled slightly. I smiled. So, Father, we need to take a side, but we can't do it openly at this sensitive time and put ourselves in direct opposition to the emperor. We need to find another way, a more subtle way. Go on, my father finally said. I thought to myself, this old fox, he won't budge until he sees a clear advantage. But at least he was finally willing to talk about the real issues and stop putting on an act. I released his shoulders, sat down across from him again, and said seriously, Father, do you know who is behind the Liam family? My father was silent, but his eyes were dark and menacing. He was clearly running through a list of suspects in his mind. I gave him the answer directly. It's the Duke of Felix. The Duke of Felix? The third prince's maternal uncle. My father's expression didn't change, his face still clouded. He had obviously suspected the Duke of Felix already. Do you have proof? My father stared at me. He wasn't questioning the answer, he wanted solid evidence. I nodded. The proof is already in your hands. The letters between Liam and the bandits are the evidence. What do you mean? Father, the paper used for the letters between Liam and the bandits is from the Jinlongtang workshop. Their secret, white decree paper is light, thin, soft yet durable, whiter than snow, and has a subtle fragrance. Because it's as pure as jade. Ink flows smoothly on it without smearing. It's been designated as an imperial tribute and supplied to the palace for royal use. My father frowned, took the letters from a hidden compartment on the bookshelf, and held them up to the light. It is indeed white decree. He tossed the letters back on the table with a cold sneer. I gathered the letters on the table and continued calmly. In the last 6 months, white decree paper has only left the palace once. That was when the emperor gifted 10 reams of it to the third prince at the Plum Blossom banquet. This is actually common knowledge, not a secret. So for Liam to have access to it, the third prince must have privately gifted it to him. But why would he use it for this? Because Liam wouldn't dare to use it openly. The paper is too distinctive. However, Liam is a man who can't stand to keep his treasures hidden. His vanity made him use the white decree when contacting the bandits, a subtle and low-key way of showing off his extraordinary status. My father pondered, shaking his head in disagreement. Not necessarily. Many people in the palace have white decree. Someone else could have given it to Liam. Impossible. I picked up a thin sheet of paper and held it to my nose. The paper the emperor gave the third prince wasn't ordinary white decree. It was an improved version called imperial. The biggest difference is that imperial contains gold leaf and ambergris. Hearing this, my father instinctively picked up another letter and sniffed it. But he knew nothing about fragrances and couldn't tell if the faint, elegant scent was the legendary ambergris. He looked at me with a hint of suspicion. I smiled calmly. Of course, a little ambergris wouldn't mean much to the third prince. But as a gift for one of his key subordinates, such a valuable imperial tribute is more than enough to show his favor. I tore a small blank piece from one of the letters, lit a candle, and held the paper over the flame. As the paper heated up, it released a delicate, elegant fragrance that filled the room and lingered. This distinctive scent completely convinced my father. It really is ambergris. So the Liam family has been in Liam with the third prince all along. My father said this, his face calm. But I knew that inside, he was seething. After all, his personality was always love them and want them to live, hate them and want them to die. He had long wanted to destroy the Liam family for slandering us, only to find out that they had already latched onto the very tree he had been eyeing. What a nuisance. So, the person who arranged for the bandits to abduct you and ruin your reputation was actually the third prince. My father's index finger tapped rhythmically on the pile of letters. I sat quietly beside him, saying nothing more. After all this, I was sure my father had made his decision. Not long after the mass virginity test scandal had died down, another wave of turmoil swept through the capital. The reason? The Prime Minister's eldest daughter, the newly crowned Princess Qingping, was insisting on marrying into the Liam family. Such a love-struck move was unheard of. Instantly, everyone in the capital was gossiping about it, their mouths flapping, desperate to make sure everyone they knew had heard the latest juicy, romantic news. The major tea houses were filled with people discussing it. Which Liam family? The one that accused the princess of not being a virgin? That's the one. My God, has Princess lost her mind? The Liam family dragged her name through the mud like that, and she still wants to marry into it? Ah well, that's the power of love, isn't it? You see, the Liam family's eldest son Liam is the princess's childhood sweetheart. He's handsome, charming, and a smooth talker. He's got her completely wrapped around his finger. She won't marry anyone else. Oh my, what's going to happen? The Prime Minister must be furious. Furious is an understatement. He's gone over to the Liams and beaten up Mr. Liam twice. Accused him of raising a son with a sweet tongue Liam and a venomous heart. Of seducing an innocent young woman. Oh, it was too scandalous to listen to, just too scandalous. Don't stop there. Tell us the details. My throat is dry from all this talking. I can't go on without a pot of good wine. Waiter, bring the wine. Your best vintage now. Everyone in the capital had turned into a gossip-hungry squirrel, scrambling for every last nut of news. They held their nuts and nibbled away delighted. Why was this news so good? Because not only was it explosive, but it also kept getting updated. Today, it was Princess insisting on marrying into the Liam family. Tomorrow, it was the Prime Minister going over and beating up the official. The day after, it was Princess kneeling and begging her father to agree to the marriage. The Prime Minister was so angry he fainted on the spot, and the princess wept over him, crying that she wouldn't get married after all. The day after that, Liam, along with the Liam family elders, came to propose, kneeling and begging the Prime Minister to let him marry the princess, only to be chased out of the house with a broom. Oh, the news just kept coming. It never stopped. It was too good. Nom nom nom. Is there more? This is the only thing keeping me going. Nom nom nom. This back and forth drama went on for over half a month. Everyone thought the two families were about to gather their clansmen and go to war, that it wouldn't end without a bloodbath. But then, the Prime Minister announced that he couldn't win against his beloved daughter, and had reluctantly agreed to the marriage. Mr. Liam, thanks to his son's handsome face and sweet words, had successfully won over the princess's heart and turned the tables. For a while, every family in the capital was on high alert. Those with daughters warned them, "Don't you dare be like that princess. She's completely lost her mind." Those with sons looked at them with disappointment. "Look at that Liam. He even managed to snag a princess. And what do you do all day? Chase cats and dogs instead of finding yourself a wife." From the day of the engagement, Mr. Liam's smile never left his face. It stretched from ear to ear. And the Prime Minister? He wouldn't even give them the time of day. He just ordered Mrs. Chun to handle the wedding preparations, and ignored everything else, out of sight, out of mind. He even let it be known, "It's as if I don't have this daughter anymore." Some people even claim to have seen the Prime Minister in a private room at a tea house, drinking and weeping, mourning how his good daughter was so determined to marry that Liam boy, how his heart was broken. But while his words were harsh, his actions spoke differently. The dowry he prepared for me grew and grew, a seemingly endless procession of gifts, enough for a grand, 10-mile-long wedding procession. And so everyone in the capital learned that the Prime Minister was a doting father with a soft heart, whose harsh words were just for show. They also learned just how much I, Princess, meant to my father. No one doubted that even after I was married, my father would continue to dote on me just as much as before. I successfully married Liam. On our wedding night, Liam didn't come to the bridal chamber. The servants I sent to fetch him came back one by one, all with the same message. The young master was still drinking with the Liamists. Seeing that most of the Liamists had left and that I had done my part, I sent the servants away, washed up, changed, and went to bed comfortably. Joy and Molly were so angry at this inconsiderate groom that they nearly chewed holes in their handkerchiefs. I secretly smiled but kept my face placid, simply telling them to go rest, leaving only one maid for the night watch. There was no point in getting angry over something so predictable. Liam knew I wasn't a virgin. He was disliamsted by it, so of course he wouldn't treat me well. Besides, he had no real feelings for me. All his sweet talk before, even getting chased down 3 streets by my father with a broom, was all for personal gain. Now that he had me, he didn't want to pretend anymore. He didn't even want to come to my room on our wedding night. He was clearly trying to put me in my place. He was a true member of the Liam family, all of them with black, rotten hearts. I pulled up the covers, put on my sleep mask, and drifted off to sleep in the brightly lit room, the wedding candles still burning. The next day, when Liam, reeking of alcohol, pushed open my door, I had already taken care of everything and was relaxing. He glanced at the blazing sun outside, then at me, reclining on a small couch, reading a book and eating fruit, looking utterly at ease. His brows furrowed into a knot. "Eleanor, why aren't you dressed yet? Look at the time. We need to go pay our respects to my parents." I glanced at him and smiled faintly. "Don't worry, husband. I've already met with my father-in-law and mother-in-law. I even got the household management token from her. Everything is taken care of. Then, as if I just remembered something, I added thoughtfully, if you're tired, husband, you can go back to sleep. I'll have a maid make you some hangover soup. You've met them? He latched onto that key phrase, completely stunned. A new bride meeting her in-laws alone? That's unheard of. Where does that leave me? And what's this about a token? Why would my mother give you a token the first time she met you? I smiled, put down the half-eaten fruit, wiped my mouth with a handkerchief, and dangled the token in front of him. You were drunk last night, husband. You didn't even come to our room. You must have been exhausted. How could I disturb your sleep? Besides, your mother was very pleased with me and eagerly gave me the token, saying the household is now mine to manage. Her love for me is so sincere, I couldn't possibly refuse. I was just about to summon the servants for a meeting to plan for next month's pufferfish banquet. Just then, Joy stepped forward at the perfect moment. Your Highness, the bookkeeper, the head housekeeper, and the managers of the family shops are all waiting in the courtyard for your instructions. I nodded. I'm on my way. Molly, seeing me stand, immediately brought over an outer coat and draped it over my shoulders. I dressed and walked towards the door. As I passed Liam, I kept a smile on my face, my voice gentle. You've always been a man of refined tastes, husband. You shouldn't worry about such mundane matters. With me here, you can rest assured. Liam. Managing the Liam family's household didn't require a weapon of my caliber. Joy could handle it perfectly. I often hugged my dear Joy and told her, if we were in the modern world, you'd at least be a department manager at a big company, managing dozens of people, no problem. Joy didn't understand, but she was still delighted by my praise. It is my duty to serve you, Your Highness. Under Joy's management, the pufferfish banquet preparations were in full swing. Eating pufferfish was the latest trend in the capital. Although there were occasional stories of people dying from it, the fish was so delicious that no one could resist its exquisite flavor. As a result, chefs in the capital who could properly prepare pufferfish were in high demand, their salaries soaring. I, being wealthy, hired 5 master chefs, each with over a decade of experience in preparing pufferfish banquets. I spared no expense to keep them, all to ensure that the banquet in a month's time would be a grand success. When I proposed the idea, my mother-in-law, Mrs. Liam, was so overjoyed at my extravagance that she couldn't stop grinning. She immediately handed over the household management token and started telling everyone how successful her son was to have married a princess. And now, they were hosting a pufferfish banquet, and all the important people in the capital would be there to taste it. Everyone felt that the Liam family was about to rise to new heights, riding on my coattails. On the night of the banquet, the Liam residence was decorated with lanterns and lights, illuminating the courtyard brightly. Musicians played festive tunes at the entrance, and inside, actors performed on a stage. The place was bustling with people and excitement. I sat at the main table, nodding and smiling at every Liamist. Liam wanted me to stand at the door with him to greet Liamists, but I refused. There must be someone of high status at the table to anchor the event. Otherwise, when Liamists arrive, they'll be wandering around like headless flies. How would that look? My mention of high status shut him up completely. The 5 master chefs lined up in the hall, each with their own cooking station, performing a live demonstration of their exquisite knife skills in preparing the pufferfish. The Liamists watched with fascination, marveling at their skill. In addition to the main pufferfish course being prepared in the hall, a stream of colorful, fragrant, and delicious dishes flowed from the kitchen, quickly filling every table. The Liamists' mouths watered in anticipation. The main table where I sat was also full, almost entirely with members of the Liam family. They ignored my status as a princess and started helping themselves to the food as soon as it arrived. When they liked something, they didn't thank me, but instead impatiently demanded the pufferfish be served faster. Once the 5 chefs had finished preparing the pufferfish, they brought it to each table. At every table, the chef would use chopsticks to pick up a piece of pufferfish from that table's dish and eat it himself. The main table was naturally served first. After the pufferfish was brought over, the master chef also picked up a piece and ate it. I saw my mother-in-law, Mrs. Liam, start to rise from her seat, clearly wanting to stop him. She thought it was a waste for a mere servant to eat such a precious delicacy first. It was a disgrace to the Liam family. Thinking this, she even had the audacity to shoot me a sharp glare. I ignored her and gestured for Joy to explain. Joy announced loudly, "These are master chefs who specialize in pufferfish banquets, with over a decade of experience. To prove that the pufferfish they have prepared is not poisonous, the chefs will personally taste a piece from your table. We hope our honored Liamists will understand." Hearing Joy's explanation, Mrs. Liam realized she had almost made a fool of herself. She blushed with shame and sat back down, not daring to speak again. Some of the Liam family relatives secretly rejoiced, saying they were being treated like the emperor. I heard this and found it laughable. Once all the dishes were served, I was the first to pick up a piece of pufferfish. The meat is tender and flavorful. Truly a delicacy from heaven. I ate with a look of pure bliss, murmuring praises. Seeing that I was fine after eating it, the Liam family members eagerly reached for their chopsticks, afraid they would miss out if they were too slow. As soon as the pufferfish touched their lips, they all showered it with praise. Mrs. Liam ate and exclaimed, "No wonder the nobles always have pufferfish banquets during the season. Even if some people die from it, they still want to eat it. I can't blame them. It really is that delicious." I had 2 pieces of pufferfish and then put down my chopsticks, starting to drink the cherry wine I had brewed myself. Seeing this, Mrs. Liam also wanted some. I glanced at her. "This is wine that I brewed myself." The implication was that she was not worthy of drinking it. But Mrs. Liam pretended not to understand, and insisted on having some. I sighed and poured her a glass. "Go ahead, drink up. I'm just too kind." Seeing me obediently pour her the wine, Mrs. Liam beamed and drained the glass. I pretended to be angry at being manipulated, put on a stern face, picked at a couple of other dishes, and then said I wasn't feeling well and needed to get some fresh air in the courtyard. Mrs. Liam thought I was just having a little tantrum and smirked, letting me leave with my maids. As the Liam family's daughter-in-law, I was always a step above her, and she was happy to have me out of her sight. I hadn't been in the courtyard for long when a servant came running, stumbling and shouting, "Something's wrong! Something's wrong! People are dead!" I had been strolling and chatting with the wives of other officials. We were all the type who couldn't stand crowded banquets for too long and needed to step out for air. We had just happened to run into each other. But when we saw the servant rushing towards us, crying that people were dead, the ladies were all shocked. "What's happened? Speak slowly." The servant's face was streaked with tears, clearly terrified. "It's terrible, Your Highness." The master and mistress and the young master and the Liam family elders. Everyone at that table has collapsed. What? I was frantic. I lifted my skirts and ran back towards the front hall. The ladies, hearing this, quickly followed me. When I arrived, everyone in the hall had backed away, staring at the main table and whispering amongst themselves. I clearly heard someone say, "It must be the pufferfish. They've been poisoned." The main table was a mess. All the Liam family members who had been sitting there were now on the floor, foaming at the mouth. Some were still convulsing, while others were completely still. Mrs. Liam's death was gruesome. Her fingers were clawed, desperately clutching her husband's clothes. Mr. Liam was no better. He was clutching his chest, and as he fell he had pulled the tablecloth with him, sending all the dishes crashing down on top of him, covering him in soup and food scraps. Liam was young and strong. He was still breathing when I got there, but barely. But surprisingly, only the Liam family members were poisoned. The Liamists and the chefs who prepared the pufferfish were all standing around, staring at the fallen Liam family, completely at a loss. I covered my mouth with a handkerchief, horrified, and screamed, "Someone! Get a doctor! Get a doctor!" Quickly. The servants rushed out to find a doctor. Joy, meanwhile, directed the other servants to maintain order and escort the Liamists out. However, many of the Liamists refused to leave, wanting to stay and watch the drama unfold. Seeing this, Joy didn't force them out, but instead invited them to rest in the courtyard, providing them with tea and fruit so they could watch the show more comfortably. The Liamists all praised me, saying even my maids were so clever and considerate. Soon, the doctors arrived and were led into the front hall. The Liamists immediately brought their tea and fruit and crowded around the entrance, craning their necks to see. They watched as several doctors knelt down to treat the patients, inducing vomiting. Using acupuncture, they tried everything. But in the end, they were helpless and could only watch as the patients took their last breaths. They stood up, shook their heads at me, and said they had done all they could, telling me to accept my loss. I fainted on the spot, caught in Molly's arms. "Your Highness, don't scare me. Doctor, please check on the princess. We can't lose her too." The Liamists watched the entire scene, fascinated. Then the authorities arrived. They sealed off the front hall, preventing the Liamists from crowding the doorway, but the Liamists still refused to leave, stubbornly remaining in the courtyard, determined to see how this story ended. Given that many of these Liamists were high-ranking officials, the authorities didn't dare to forcefully remove them. They turned a blind eye and let them continue their gossip watching from the courtyard. I, having fainted, was carried out of the front hall. Joy deliberately had me brought to the courtyard and revived me with smelling salts. I slowly came to, and in front of all the spectators, burst into tears. How could this happen? The pufferfish. I ate a lot of it too. Why? Why did this happen? I sobbed uncontrollably, lamenting my cruel fate, then wondering if someone had murdered the Liam family, then blaming my mother-in-law for not letting me handle the entire banquet, which must have led to some mistake I didn't know about. The Liamists were lapping up the drama. Before long, the constables and coroners finished examining the scene, conferred with the doctors who had tried to save the patients, and then came out to the courtyard to find me. I was so weak from crying I could barely stand. Seeing the chief inspector, I forced myself up from Molly's arms and went to meet him. "Chief Inspector Lin, someone must have secretly poisoned our entire family. You must bring them to justice." Chief Inspector Lin looked at me with a mixture of pity and a poorly concealed suspicion. "Your Highness, I have a few questions for you." "Chief Inspector, please ask whatever you need to," I said, wiping my tears, my voice hoarse. "Did you eat the pufferfish as well?" I nodded weakly. "Yes. I am the host. I had to be the first to eat. It's a matter of etiquette. The chefs who made the pufferfish ate it too, right in front of us, and they're all fine." Joy interjected. The chief inspector then asked, "Why was there a dish of fermented corn soup on the main table, but not on any of the others?" "Oh, that was something my mother-in-law insisted on adding as an appetizer. I didn't think it went well with the rest of the banquet, so I only had it served at the main table to satisfy her. The other tables didn't have it." "And did you eat every dish on the table, Your Highness?" I looked lost, trying to recall. "I think I tried everything." I looked uncertainly at Joy. Joy quickly said, "I was the one serving Her Highness. I gave her a taste of almost every dish, so—" "Almost?" Chief Inspector Lin's ears perked up. "So there was a dish you didn't give her?" "Of course. Her Highness is of noble birth. Not everything is fit for her to eat," Joy said proudly. "And which dish didn't you give her?" "That fermented corn soup." Joy said it loudly, her face full of disdain. A perfectly elegant pufferfish banquet, with every dish carefully selected by Her Highness to be a work of art. And my lady's mother-in-law insists on adding a dish of fermented corn soup. Chief Inspector Lin frowned. "What's wrong with fermented corn soup?" "Fermented corn soup is a coarse food for commoners. How could Her Highness eat such a thing? A pufferfish banquet is so refined. Adding a dish like that is just improper." Her Highness was completely against it, but she couldn't refuse when her mother-in-law insisted, saying her father-in-law loved it and it had to be there. They say filial piety is the greatest virtue, so of course Her Highness had to agree. But agreeing is one thing, eating it is another. I never served Her Highness a single bite of that soup. It's not worthy. I let Joy go on, my head bowed, tears streaming down my face, not saying a word. Chief Inspector Lin understood. He turned to the constable behind him. "The doctors are still here. Have them check if that fermented corn soup was poisoned." Hearing this, I quickly said, "Chief Inspector, all the other dishes today were made by my kitchen staff. Only the fermented corn soup was made by Matron. But Matron has been with my in-laws for many years. She's my mother-in-law's trusted servant. She might poison me, but she would never poison her mistress." Chief Inspector Lin said in a low voice, Perhaps there's more to this story. Please try not to worry, Your Highness. I nodded, my eyes still wet with tears. A moment later, a constable returned with a report. The fermented corn soup was not poisoned. But it was the fermented corn soup that killed them. Hearing this, Chief Inspector Lin's brow furrowed into a tight knot. Are you speaking in riddles? The doctors, seeing his confusion, quickly explained, the soup wasn't deliberately poisoned with something like arsenic. However, the soup itself was deadly because it was spoiled and had gone bad. My face showed even greater confusion. How could it be spoiled? Matron just made it this evening. It was less than an hour before the banquet started. There's no way it could have gone bad in that time. The doctors waved their hands. Even if it was freshly made, if the ingredients themselves were already spoiled, the resulting food would be inedible. I looked at Joy again. Joy nodded firmly. Your Highness, the fermented corn soup was made entirely by Matron, from start to finish. Even the ingredients were stored in the Liam family's kitchen, so we had no control over it. Chief Inspector Lin immediately ordered Matron to be brought in, and personally went to the Liam family's kitchen to inspect the food storage. Matron, her eyes swollen from crying, pointed to a sack of corn in the corner. I made it with this. I've been making it for years and never had a problem. A doctor opened the sack and saw that the corn looked mostly fine on the outside, but when he brought it close to his nose, he could smell a faint odor of mold and decay. Without a doubt, this corn is the culprit. The doctors shook their heads. All of this corn has gone bad. Hearing this, I pointed at Matron and cursed her. You heartless wretch. My mother-in-law treated you so well, and you were too stingy to even use fresh corn to make their soup. Men, drag this poisonous woman out and beat her. I couldn't finish my sentence. The grief was so overwhelming that a sharp pain shot through my chest, and I collapsed into Molly's arms again. Matron, terrified, fell to her knees crying for mercy. Your Highness, spare me. I've been making this soup for the mistress my whole life, and never had a problem. The corn was purchased by the household manager. I told him it wasn't fresh, but he said it was just for one dish of soup, so what did it matter? With all the other delicacies at the banquet, who would even pay attention to the fermented corn soup? So I had no choice. If I had known that using spoiled corn would kill the master and mistress, I would have died myself before I used that cursed corn. Listening to Matron's cries, I let myself faint completely. The rest had nothing to do with me. Boncrecic acid, a toxin with an extremely high mortality rate, often found in spoiled fermented corn products, spoiled fresh silver ear mushrooms, and spoiled starchy foods. See, killing is so easy. My mission in the Liam family was complete. Less than a month after marrying in, my husband's entire family was dead. I was innocent and blameless. But even though it was their own carelessness that led to the food poisoning, I inevitably got labeled as a black widow. This was a feudal, ancient world after all. But I didn't care at all. White mourning banners were hung at the Liam residence. I put on mourning clothes and in the memorial hall, I wailed over Liam's coffin. Husband, how could you be so cruel? We never even consummated our marriage. You didn't even leave me with a child. How could you just leave me like this? I cried and beat the floor, my heart supposedly broken. Suddenly, a smug female voice came from above. So, even a princess can't keep a man's heart, I see. Hearing this, I couldn't suppress a smile. Using the pretense of burying my head to cry, I quickly composed my expression. When I looked up, I was once again the picture of pure, bewildered, tear-streaked pity. Who are you? In less than half a day, a new piece of gossip was served up to the hungry masses. According to those who went to the Liam residence to offer their condolences, a pregnant woman had shown up at the memorial hall that morning. The woman claimed to be Liam's mistress, and that she was carrying his child. She was there to claim her share of the inheritance. And Princess was powerless against her, because not only was she a new bride, but she had never even consummated her marriage with Liam. This was all revealed during their confrontation, with no room for denial. Even if the princess wanted to lie and say she and Liam had been intimate, the woman revealed a shocking secret. Liam had become impotent before he even married the princess. She produced a medical record from a clinic outside the city, which clearly stated that Liam had injured his root in a fall from a horse and was unable to perform. The princess, seeing the medical record, her eyes wide, muttered, "So that's why. That's why." With the medical record and Liam's personal effects as proof, the woman's unborn child was the Liam family's only heir, and the princess couldn't deny it. The princess, furious and desperate, fainted again. The doctor who was called said she couldn't take any more stress, or she might not live. The Prime Minister couldn't sit still when he heard the news. He stormed into the Liam residence with his sons and servants and forcefully brought the princess back to his own home to recover. "My daughter has been married into the Liam family for over a month and is still a virgin." That Liam was impotent. This was a fraudulent marriage. "I will report this to the emperor and request a royal decree of divorce. As for the Liam family, they are a mess. My daughter will have no part in this filth." The Liam family fell into ruin. The extended family members packed their bags and returned to the countryside, unable to remain in the capital. The once hotly discussed Liam family, which had been the talk of the town just a month ago, faded into obscurity, as if they had never existed in the capital at all. I gave my father all the evidence I had collected from the Liam family. My father looked at the box of documents that had been brought back with my dowry, and he gave me a smile of relief and approval. "Eleanor, you've worked hard." I said nothing. My father flipped through the documents, a ruthless glint in his eye. "Eleanor, prepare yourself. In a little while, after the dust settles, you will be the crown princess." My father didn't say why he was so certain. I didn't lie him or question him. I just curtsied and left the study. I walked slowly, as if strolling through the courtyard, or perhaps lost in thought under the covered walkway. Finally, I arrived at the Cloud Pavilion. Just then, my stepsister walked out of the courtyard, and we came face to face. I watched her silently. When she saw it was me, her pretty face instantly clouded over. A black widow, a jinx, and she thinks she can just come back and be the Prime Minister's daughter again. Tui. How unlucky. My stepsister insulted me as if on reflex, then turned to go back and wash with pomelo leaves to ward off bad luck. I called out to her. "The jinx you're talking about will soon be the crown princess." My stepsister stopped in her tracks and spun around to glare at me. "What a joke. You a second-hand woman?" I nodded. "Yes." "What? Has father gone mad?" My stepsister, furious, pushed past me and ran towards my father's study. Her maid chased after her, but she couldn't keep up with my stepsister's burning desire for wealth, power, and the title of empress. I smiled. It's so easy to stir up these people's greed. So easy. I watched my stepsister's back disappear down the walkway, then turned and went back to my own courtyard. The show at the family was about to begin. The Liam family had done a lot of things for the third prince, all very secret. The connection was so hidden that even the emperor was unaware of it. My father took the pile of evidence of the third prince's secret recruitment of soldiers, but he didn't go directly to the emperor with it. He found an excuse to expose a small flaw in the third prince's plans, leading the emperor to investigate for himself. Finding a needle in a haystack is hard, but if you know where to look, it's much easier. The emperor quickly uncovered the connection between the third prince and the Liam family, and learned what his son had been doing behind his back. He even found out that the third prince had orchestrated the bandit attack on the original Eleanor. The third prince wanted to marry me to gain the Prime Minister's support. But to control me, and to control my father, he first wanted to ruin my reputation. Then, when I was disgraced, he would step in and offer to marry me. Even if it was just as a concubine, my family would be eternally grateful, and I would be utterly devoted to him. These predators, who build their power on the bones of their victims, are truly disliamsting. The emperor wasn't initially too concerned about this. He finally hammered the third prince was already secretly raising an army, and plotting rebellion. One more crime didn't make much difference. And although the third prince had rebellious intentions, he was still young. The so-called army he was raising had less than 10,000 men. What could he possibly do with that? So the emperor hesitated, considering how to handle the situation to eliminate the threat while preserving the third prince's life as much as possible. But just then, another crisis erupted in the palace. The Empress Dowager fell gravely ill, and the entire imperial medical staff rushed to her side. The diagnosis itself wasn't the problem. The problem was in her medical record. Because it was an emergency, the doctors conducted a full-body examination and recorded all her symptoms. When the emperor read the record, he learned that the Empress Dowager had a large, old scar on her back. The marks looked as if they had been made by a sharp comb. The emperor froze as if struck by lightning. Two Philiamras overlapped in his mind. The slender Philiamra who, in his childhood, had scrambled from his father's bed, clutching her messy clothes as she fled, and the equally slender Philiamra who had set fire to his mother's palace. And on that fleeing Philiamra, the one thing that stood out was the scar on her back, like a comb had been scraped across it. It was the same person. Even without any evidence, the emperor knew. They were the same person. The person who had killed his mother and tried to kill him too, had simply changed her face, become the gentle and loving consort Lien, taken him into her own palace to raise, and then used him to become the Empress Dowager. She had built her throne on his mother's bones, ruined him, and then pretended to be his great benefactor, basking in his gratitude and protection. How could he bear it? The emperor ordered the doctors to use the strongest medicine to wake the Empress Dowager, no matter what. He had too many questions to ask her. No one knows what the emperor and the Empress Dowager talked about that night. All they know is that when the emperor left her chambers, the Empress Dowager was already dead. My father's spies in the palace reported that there were 2 bruised handprints on her neck. She had been strangled to death. The person who did it was clearly filled with a monstrous hatred, as if they wanted to snap her neck completely. The emperor executed all the servants who knew about the Empress Dowager's past, especially Matronin, who had been with her for years. She was sentenced to death by 1,000 cuts. My father was fully aware of all the turmoil in the palace. Then he did something just like I had done before. He told the third prince that his beloved eldest daughter was now divorced and at home, her reputation ruined by a second marriage, and he, her old father, was so worried about her future that he couldn't sleep at night. The third prince, unaware that the emperor was already watching him, was secretly delighted to hear of my father's troubles. The next day, he went to the emperor and asked for his blessing to marry me. In the past, the emperor might have agreed. But today, not only did he not answer immediately, but he also stared at his kneeling son with an icy gaze. The third prince said he didn't mind that I was a divorcee, and was willing to take me as a concubine. The emperor immediately remembered what he had learned about the third prince's plan to ruin my reputation before marrying me. He also remembered the recently deceased Empress Dowager. They were the same. They both pushed people to the brink of death, and then swooped in like saviors, offering a small kindness in exchange for draining their victims dry. His own son was just as vile and cruel as the person who had murdered his mother. The emperor's heart was already numb with pain. He looked at the third prince, still chattering on at the foot of the throne, and slowly, closed his eyes. He had made his choice. The third prince's faction was either exiled or imprisoned. The third prince himself was stripped of his title and became a commoner, his path to the throne forever blocked. The emperor acted quickly and ruthlessly, giving the third prince's supporters no time to react or resist. He was determined to crush these disliamsting people. The fact that he didn't kill the third prince was the last flicker of a father's love. But that was all. After dealing with the third prince's faction, the emperor turned his attention back to me and arranged another marriage. He wanted to compensate me, just as he wanted to compensate the motherless child he once was. We were both victims of the lust for power. The emperor married me to the first prince. This was exactly what my father had predicted. After all, he knew the emperor well. With the third prince gone, the emperor had to choose between the first and second princes. And no matter how you looked at it, the first prince, who had also lost his mother at a young age, was more to his liking. He followed the script my father had written for him, step by step. Half a year later, I married the first prince and became his official wife. Everyone Liamly sensed that the first prince was likely to be the next crown prince. My stepsister started visiting me at the first prince's residence all the time, always choosing to come when the first prince was there. I knew what she was up to, and I let her. I just made sure to have a plate of fresh, raw marinated seafood on the table every time she came. Then I would make an excuse to leave, letting the first prince and my stepsister be alone in the room. This went on for several months, until one day they both collapsed. They were found naked and wrapped around each other. When the doctor arrived, the first prince and my stepsister were still vomiting uncontrollably, unable to even stand. In the end, the doctor couldn't save them. After a day and a night of agony, the first prince and my stepsister both died. I stood outside the door and listened as the doctor announced their deaths, my heart a cold, empty void. E. coli, listeria, botulism, salmonella, liver flukes, intestinal flukes, tapeworms, roundworms. The bacteria and parasites likely to be found in raw marinated seafood were a death sentence for people in this era. Their deaths were inevitable. All I did was wait. The first prince's sudden death enraged the emperor. Upon investigation, he learned that the first prince had recently developed a taste for raw marinated seafood and would often enjoy it with my stepsister. They would eat it with great relish, praising it as the ultimate delicacy. They had been eating it for months without any problems, but this time they both died. Could someone have poisoned them? A thorough investigation revealed that it wasn't poison. It was simply that after the food was prepared, the first prince and my stepsister didn't eat it right away. Instead, they had sex first. Several hours later, they ate the seafood that had been sitting out on the table. The food had spoiled in that time, and so they died. While they were in bed together, Liamards were stationed outside the door. No one had come near the room. As for my stepsister and the first prince's secret affair, I tearfully told the emperor that I was just a woman. If my husband liked my stepsister, how could I object? I naturally wanted to fulfill my husband's wishes. It was also because the first prince loved raw marinated seafood that I always had it prepared. How was I to know he wouldn't eat it right away? And how was I to know he would be with my stepsister for so long? I covered my face and wept, on the verge of fainting. I played the part of a foolish woman who blindly obeyed her husband, had no opinions of her own, and was too ashamed to air her family's dirty laundry in public. I played it to perfection. The emperor investigated thoroughly, but couldn't find any evidence that I had tampered with anything. The spies he had placed in the first prince's residence also confirmed how submissive I was to my husband. I never liamed with him. Whatever he wanted, I provided. Even when he wanted to be with my stepsister, I never said a word of protest. I even treated my stepsister with the utmost care, afraid she wouldn't serve the first prince well and upset him. Hearing how foolishly submissive I was, the emperor was finally convinced of my innocence. But his own son dying from eating spoiled food after having sex with a woman, it was not a story that sounded good. So the emperor had to grit his teeth and have the first prince buried under the liamis of a sudden illness. I fainted several times from grief and soon fell ill myself, delirious with fever. I was in no condition to return to the first prince's residence to manage the funeral. The emperor, having no other choice, had me stay in the palace to recuperate under the care of consort. Consort had been propped up by the emperor to counterbalance the late Empress Dowager. Now that the Dowager was dead, Consort was in charge of the entire harem. She came from a military family and had a bold, decisive personality, but she was also very attentive. After hearing my story, she was extremely sympathetic and took meticulous care of me. She was even afraid that I would be reminded of my past trauma, and made sure that no seafood ever appeared in my meals. My diet consisted mainly of pork, chicken, and vegetables, all to help me recover. I was able to spend a peaceful and comfortable time in Consort Palace. Consort had not been favored by the late emperor, and had lived a rather bleak life. This experience, combined with being the co-ruler of the harem, and facing off against the late Empress Dowager for years, had made her weary and somber. In her own words, she was about to sprout mold and rot. My arrival brought a new liveliness to her life, giving her something to look forward to. We got along wonderfully, a pair of kindred spirits. We gradually developed a mother-daughter bond. Consort treated me like her own daughter, and I respected and cared for her like a mother. We became an important part of each other's lives. And just as I was peacefully recovering, a bombshell piece of news reached the palace, so shocking that I dropped the medicine bowl I was holding. My father and my stepmother had suddenly died, right in the Prime Minister's residence. My face went pale, my body swayed, and I collapsed to the floor. The last thing I saw was Consort, her face filled with panic, rushing towards me. When I woke up, Consort was sitting by my bed. She told me gravely what had happened. Recently, a merchant ship had brought a batch of sea snails to the capital. They were preserved using a special method that gave them a unique, wild flavor. They became an instant sensation, a culinary trend that swept through the city. The Prime Minister's residence, following the trend, had purchased some of these snails. They were stir-fried with spices, and a full, fragrant plate was served at my father's table. My father and stepmother ate them and found them delicious, savory, spicy, sweet, and with a tender, juicy texture. After finishing the plate of snails, their lips soon went numb, they had trouble breathing, and they quickly fell unconscious. The servants, terrified, rushed to get a doctor. But by the time the doctor arrived, they were both already dead. After examining their meal, the doctor slapped his thigh and sighed heavily. They've eaten nefarious snails. Oh, once you eat those, not even the gods can save you. Later, people who live by the sea explained that while sea snails are delicious, you have to avoid the nefarious variety. They are poisonous, but they look almost identical to ordinary sea snails. It's very difficult for a non-expert to tell them apart. Even people who live by the sea sometimes die from eating them by mistake. All they could say was that the Prime Minister and his wife were just too unlucky. After hearing what Consort said, a single tear slid down my cheek. The light in my empty eyes faded. Consort squeezed my hand, her heart aching for me. It's all right, Eleanor. Everything will be all right. I didn't answer. I slowly closed my eyes. Nefarious snails. A neurotoxin. The same family as the pufferfish toxin. Even though I was in the palace, I could still correspond with my father. All I did was occasionally mention in my letters the delicious seafood that only the royal family could eat, including sea snails. Then I had Joy's brother, who lived by the sea and was a fisherman, secretly mix a few nefarious snails into the batch purchased by the Prime Minister's residence. Even if they didn't eat those specific snails, just cooking them with the others would have spread the toxin into the sauce. A single taste of that sauce would have been fatal. It was that simple. I was far away in the palace, my hands clean. On the surface, the tragedy at my family's home had nothing to do with me. With that, I had finally completed my revenge for the original Eleanor. Everyone who had ever hurt her was gone. Not a single one escaped. And I did it all without a scratch. A perfect multi-kill. I'm so awesome. Although I wasn't held responsible for their deaths, I was now considered an unlucky person. Many believed that the Liam family, the first prince, and my own family had all been jinxed by me. They weren't wrong. With the reputation of being a jinx, I couldn't stay in the palace for long. So before the emperor could say anything, I took the initiative and requested to leave. I said that as an unlucky person, I wished to spend the rest of my life in a convent, chanting sutras for my deceased family, hoping they would have a better life in their next reincarnation. The emperor let out a sigh of relief and immediately granted my request. Consort, not wanting to part with me, also asked to go with me. The emperor tried to persuade her to stay, but she said, I'm old. I'm not afraid of these things. Even if there is bad luck, it shouldn't matter under the protection of the Buddha. The emperor couldn't change her mind, and since she wasn't a particularly important Philiamra, he waved his hand and let her go. On our way to the temple with Consort, I faked a carriage accident. We made it look like our carriage had fallen off a cliff, leaving no bodies behind, successfully fooling the Liamards. As the Liamards returned to the palace to report to the emperor, I, along with Consort, Joy, Molly, and my other trusted servants, boarded a merchant ship that was waiting for us on the coast. The ship was already loaded with my 10-mile-long dowry. As soon as I was on board, we set sail for a foreign land. With this much money, I could easily become a local ruler in one of those small countries. Hehe. The future is bright. The end.